all of us at Julia Jacks Consulting. My name is Julia Jacks, and it's a joy to be with you all this year. There's a feedback from the audio. Let me try and sort that out. Yeah, let me just stop that out a bit. So let me go off video for a minute. And a happy new year to okay. All right, yeah, I think that's better. Okay. Well, what is life without a glitch or two? Well, like I was saying, Happy New Year to each and every one of you. And it's such a pleasure to be back here live with you. You know, it gets such a vibe from being live, you know. So we've run unplugged for a cumulative over 12 months now. All right, yeah, I think that's better. Okay. Well, what is life without a glitch or two? Well, like I was saying, Happy New Year to each and every one of you. And it's such a pleasure to be back here live with you. You know, it gets such a vibe from being live, you know. So we've run unplugged for a cumulative over 12 months now. All right, yeah, I think. I'd like to thank all our guests. I hope you can still hear me. I think there's something wrong with this, so we will sort it out later. If you can hear me, please let me know. I'd like to thank all our guests, everybody who's been a member of our audience through 2022, our growing online and physical community. Thank you very much. And to our family and friends, and most definitely to everybody on the JJC team, Julia Jacks Consulting team. This, for January and February, we've curated what we call a foundational series, and it's called Themed Mind Your Business. Now, what does mind your business mean? It means that for 7 weeks, we'll bring you subject matter experts, like the experts we have today, to discuss different key areas of business, branding, and how to do both. You know, from the mind, we're going to look at it from the mind to money, to politics, to networking. It's going to be fun as far as I'm really informative. And today it's a pleasure to welcome stephREDD. Thank you for being our guest today.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here.
She's Stephanie Kadiri, but her professional name byline is stephREDD. And I'm sure you can see her signature red glasses, which look absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
Well, Stephanie is a trained linguist. She's a certified life coach. She's an emotional intelligence and cognitive behavioral therapy practitioner. And her interventions have reached several thousands of professionals and individuals, locally and internationally, who are at different phases in their life and career. And she's helped them, through her interventions, helped redirect many on a trajectory of optimized living. What does all of this mean? We are looking at optimized living. We're looking at minding your mind. There's a book by Joyce Meyer that says the battlefield of the mind. And a lot of things emanate from the mind, you know. When Stephanie and I started talking, we spoke first in December 2022, when we were both reeling from the demise of Stephen Laurel Boss, also known as Twitch. Most of you would know him as Twitch. Twitch was an American choreographer, hip hop dancer, television personality, actor, son, husband, father, and altogether great guy who always wore a smile as big as the moon. And no one knew that on December 13th, he was going to leave this world in that way. And Stephanie and I were introduced And we had this long conversation about extroverts, about crazy people, about what I've called the tears of a clown syndrome, And we felt that to start the year, we should look at people who seem to be doing okay, but they're really not doing okay. Because typically when we ask people, how are you doing? Just say, I'm fine. And we pass on because we're dealing with our own issues as well. And there are many other people that we know and those we don't know who have taken this path. There's been before Twitch, there was Robin Williams, there's been Kate Spade, there's been Anthony Bourdain. There have been many people in Nigeria who have, some we know, some we don't know, who have walked this path of pain. Some have gone, some are still here. But we thought it's best to start off with the foundational issue of minding your mind, paying attention to your mind. And I'd like to start off with asking Stephanie, can you share with us your initial thoughts, your thoughts about the mind and why mental health issues matter so much?
Thank you. Thank you for that background. I give some perspective as well. Sometime a few weeks ago, I overheard a colleague talking, so pretty much he's also enthused by the mind. And I'm just going to share something very significant that he said, that when God wanted to create a tree, he hid the seeds in the ground. So you have to pretty much dig up the ground to get out the seed. And when he wanted to hide the fish, he hid them in the water. And when he wanted to hide a couple of other things, but quite significant, when he wanted to hide himself, he hid himself in the mind of man. And I'm saying that, referring that to mean that the mind is the most powerful thing. It is the most powerful organ that God created. It determines who we become. It determines how we become. And just having that understanding would help us, will give a better perspective to how we engage, recognizing that whatever we do or do not do, whatever we choose or do not choose, is going to have an adverse effect on who we become and who we progressively become. Already has an adverse effect on who we have become. So the mind is quite powerful because everything really, like Joyce Meyer said, all battles start and end in the mind. If you can win it in the mind, you can win it in your life. Just the ability to control that, just the ability to take charge of that and navigate through life will determine the kind of outcome that we get, will determine the kind of life that we'll live, whether it's a wholesome one, whether it's an unwholesome one, it pretty much will determine it. So it's quite important that at every point in time, every stage of our lives, we are in touch with our minds. And just to, would I say, de-emphasize the word mind, we should be in touch with our thoughts and just being able to catch our thoughts before they become things, because all thoughts become things. All thoughts eventually translate into action. So at the point of thought, the ability to catch that thought and navigate the options to represent it in a manner that we will be glad to receive when it becomes a thing or it becomes an action is quite important. So all of it, when we're talking about minding your mind, we're as well saying mind your thoughts, because out of your thoughts, things will become and actions become, and your life's outcome will become. Yeah.
I think that's really a power, and I wouldn't call it a soundbite. That's just such a powerful and mind-altering statement. Out of all thoughts eventually become things. So we really need to pay attention to all our thoughts, capture our thoughts, and that's why it matters. What we think, not emotions so much, because what we think will eventually have an effect on our emotions. And I just want to reiterate for people who are just joining some of the things that you've said that have really hit me, like when God made man, like yeah, he probably hid himself in the mind of man, you know, and who we become, who we have become, who we've been in the past, who we are now, who we will become. They're all a product of the choices that we make, and that's where we make our choices. That's where we make our choices. That is, I'm also monitoring the chat box to see if there's any comments that we would feed off from. But I'd like to just talk, okay, mind issues, mental health issues more prevalent now. They seem to be very compelling now. At a time, and I'll tell you the truth, at a time I thought it was just something that we wanted to just keep saying. And this is years ago. Just say, oh yeah, I'm depressed. I know when I was a teenager, I'd tell my mom, oh, you know, I'm a Cancerian, Cancerians are moody, you know, and things like that. And she'll tell me, out of the zillions of Cancerians in this world, do you think all of you have the same mindset? So when we started hearing depression and stuff like that, I felt, okay, maybe we are all just falling onto another bandwagon. But what is your thinking on this? Are mental health issues more prevalent now than before? Are they more compelling? And is there a demographic weighting? Age, gender, urban, suburban?
So I have a bit of a different perspective to this, and I'll just share my perspective the way it is. I think the mental health thing has always been there, but we had a more, would I say, a more resilient people. And I'm going to pull that from something that I heard someone say, whether the Sheikh or so of Dubai said, that his great-grandfather rode a camel. His grandfather rode a horse or so. His father rode a car, and he's flying a jet.
Yes.
That his son, that I think he's flying a limousine. His son will fly a jet. His son's son will probably fly a limousine or something like that. And his great-grandson will ride a horse. And his great-great-grandson would ride a camel, because hard times produce tough people, and easy times produce weak people. Those were the words. And over time, what has happened is, I believe, and I'm translating it from my observations and perspectives, the easier life became, the tougher it became for us to adapt as individuals. The easier things, the weaker we became physically, the weaker we became mentally, to be able to handle things, to be able to, that bounce back spirit, that bounce back ability to say, okay, the fact that I dug this pit or I dug this well and I didn't find water does not mean I would stop digging. Does not mean the world or God is against me. I will look for somewhere else and dig. And I'm just going to draw the example of, was it Joseph, or who was the person that kept digging? He dug a pit here, and the Philistines came and they filled it up. He went somewhere else, he dug another pit, they filled it up. He went and he kept digging up until he found a breakthrough. And what happens is, we dig one, and because someone fills it up or someone throws a word at us or something happens, we cower. But going back to the real core of this mental health thing, I think it is overemphasized. It is the outcome. It's not the root cause. The root cause, or when the Bible says, and I draw a lot of my wisdom understanding from the Bible, it's my source. So for those that may not be Christians here, understand that that's my source, and that's where I get my wisdom and my knowledge and everything from. And I believe that everything, all philosophers and everything that they have become, if you go to the roots of everything they are saying, it is in the Bible. So I draw my wisdom from there. And I was going to say that, because when it says that, guard your heart with all diligence, because out of it comes forth the issues of this life.
Issues of life, yeah.
Now, your heart, whatever affects when give an example of something happens, we can't stop the triggers. We can't, We can't determine when they come or when they go, but it is how we interpret it, our interpretation of that trigger, how we interpret it, how we think it, going back to the mind. It first starts with what you think about it. And then when the thought stays long enough, if you don't catch it and navigate it, you begin to feel something about it. And based on how you feel, you react, right? Now, that should be the typical process if you learn to catch your thoughts. But when you don't learn to catch your thought, it goes from something happens, you react. It's after you have reacted that you know, something happens, you feel. And now based on how you feel, you react without thinking. It's after you have reacted that you think. But by then it may be too late because your reaction may have been out of order. And that now added to the fact that we are in a society where there's now a lot of pressure, a pressure to be, a pressure to become, and they that compare themselves with themselves are not wise, because we are comparing ourselves and we're no longer full and joyful and contented with the uniqueness of the genius that we carry. We see someone else and think that that person is better. We think that that person looks better, that person smiles better, that person is better. And by all means, we want to become that person. And by not becoming that person, we lose our joy, we lose our peace, we lose our contentment. In the cause of all of that, we have already lost ourselves. And so we are under a pressure to be, under a pressure to prove, under a pressure to show up outside of our habitats. Just like how it is that a bird is under the pressure to want to swim like a fish. And because the fish keeps saying, nah, 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 you cannot swim like me, the bird now says, oh, I'm not a genius. That fish is a genius. Let me dive into the water. We all know what will happen. And then the bird now comes the other day and says, nah, look at you swimming, 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 swimming. Your job is swimming, swimming, swimming. Only swimming you know how to do when your mates are flying. And one thing I like to tell people is, no one is your mate. When you get to recognize that the fact that you are classmates, roommates, flatmates, housemates, whatever it is, you are not life mates. And the ability to distinguish between who someone else is and who you are so that you can operate from the fullness of yourself is going to help you understand how to be more contented and operate from a fuller place. Because without that, you will feel sad that you're not operating like someone else. Stay in the sad place long enough, you get into depression. Stay in the depressed place long enough, you begin to think that you're not good enough, the world is unfair towards you, what's your use here? And suicide becomes an option. So all going back to being able to, when we talk about mental health, like I said, that's the peripheral. The deep things are the thoughts that we think about ourselves, how we feel about situations, how we interpret those situations, because many times the interpretations we give to things may not be the true position of those things. And the ability to understand what the true position is and decide how we want to see it, how we want to interpret it, would go a long way to determine how happy we are, how happy we stay with ourselves, and how contented and joyful we are with ourselves and with the world around us. So speaking mental health, what is actually causing your mental health issues? What are the things that have affected your heart? What are the things that have affected your health? What are the things that have affected your finances? I believe in breaking it down. When you don't break it down, just in my mental health, what specifically, break it down into the minutest details so that you can deal with it. What you can't track, you really can't, you can't contain, right? You can't correct. Until you're able to name it, then you can tame it. Until you're able to spot what it is, then you can stop it from doing anything harmful to you. So before you start thinking, being able to catch your thoughts to say, why am I feeling sad? Being able to say, I'm in a mood. What is causing it? What in my environment is causing me to feel this way? What have I heard? Because everything that we be, everything that we feel is as a result of what we have perceived through our eyes, our ear gates, through what we have experienced in an environment. So for every time, which is why we need to be mindful of the environments that we are part of. We need to be mindful of associations. Those are environments. Office, place of work, that is an environment. Your friends, that is an environment. Your church, your mosque, that is an environment. Those are different environments. So when you're in an environment and you feel something, you're able to catch your thoughts, understand the emotion you're feeling per time, and say, why am I feeling this way? What in my environment is triggering this? How can I transform this thought? How can I transform this feeling to a more joyful feeling? What does a joyful feeling look like? How would I like to now attain that joyful feeling and make the intentional effort now to walk towards it? When we're able to deal with those things at the roots, then mental health really not be an issue, because we won't just say, oh, my mental health. What exactly is it about mental health? You can track it. And because you can track it, you can tame it.
Okay. So many things are just bubbling up in my mind. Let me start with the one that comes to the top of my mind. This morning, I had a conversation with my teenager, and she said, oh, from when she was 7 years to when she was a baby were the most joyful times of her life. I'm like, oh my goodness, we've got so many more years ahead of you. Why were they joyful anyway? And she said, I didn't have to worry about anything. I didn't have to think about anything. Anything I wanted, people did for me, And then when I got to year 7, when I got to 7 years, it now exams became a thing and stuff like that. And she now asked me, remember the most joyful years of your life? And it took me a little while to think, because what you said now is something that we need to track our thoughts. What are those things that make us joyful? What are those things that make us gloomy? And track them down. And maybe I think we will come to that by the end of it. But from what you said, we have to operate from the fullness. We're created to operate from the fullness of ourselves. And when we do not, then we are actually shooting ourselves in the foot. And then the other thing is that we have to be extremely mindful of our environments, and also of, if I can say this, learned helplessness. Just because other people are being helpless or talking about it on certain platforms, we feel, yeah, okay, yeah, that's it, I'm depressed. And the more you say I'm depressed, I'm sad, the more it sits with you, because it's a spirit and it just sits. You just call it and it just comes and says, hi, I'm here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it sits with you. So just so we can help people navigate this. Okay, I have a couple of questions from Rita, and she says, I'll start with the second question. Could it also be the realization of the I factor as opposed to the we factor in developing our minds? That's a perspective. We are now focused on I, me, myself, and I, rather than the communal living we lived in before, Because before you said, people, the weaker we became physically, the weaker we also became mentally. And I can see the logic in that. So Rita is asking, could it be the I factor, me, myself, I, as opposed to the we factor that has affected us in a certain way? What's your perspective on that?
So I'm trying to understand. I read it and I was trying to just understand the perspective she was coming from. So I'm assuming that she's referring to, is it the I factor that is affecting how the mental health issue challenges as against the we factor? If that could be looked at from different perspectives. Quite importantly, we were not, as human beings, we were not created to be in silos. We're created to collaborate. However, in the rise of
I think we have a glitch from Stephanie. If you can hear me, please come back in. I think we have a glitch from you. Or maybe you could exit and come back in. Okay. I'm sure she'll come back in. So I'd like to know, what are your views? Is it the I factor? Are we too focused on ourselves right now? Or are we operating in silos? You know, I know it's said really most popularly when we say the marriage vows, man was not made to be alone, neither was woman made to be alone, nobody was made to be alone. And isolation can be a real bummer. It can really mess with your mind and make you think things and think thoughts and probably do things that you didn't plan to. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. You have to unmute yourself, please.
Oh, I was saying I disappeared and I just realized that I disappeared. I apologize. Like I said, that yes, what is life without a few glitches or two?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, right. So I please remind me, let me know where I left off. Where was it? What was the last thing I just
we're talking about the I factor, that man was not really created to live in silos.
Yes, we're not created to live in silos, but on this competition thing to want to arrive, and then we arrive and realize that that's not the end of arrival, there is more, and then we push ourselves to want to arrive to the next phase and realize that, oh, there is more, and then we push ourselves. So at one point we are the number one in the world and we find that someone takes over. No, I want to get there. And because we keep pushing ourselves, many times we do not know when to stop. And when we don't know when to stop, by the time we stop, it's either something is taking a toll on our health, on our emotions, on our physical health, on our emotional health, on our spiritual health, on our mental health. Because of that, and that drive, and it's an insatiable thing, the human desire to want to feel something, to want to feel the hollow that is within, that we're using everything without to feel. And in that drive, we sometimes burn bridges, we sometimes think that it's okay to run solo. We sometimes don't realize that we need a circle of encouragement, of people that hear you, that see you, that appreciate you, that recognize you, that regard you, that support you, that uplift you, that fuel you. And when you are not fueled, when all of that, which is pretty much what fills up your, or refuels your enthusiasm to want to live, to want to go to the next level, to want to collaborate with the next person, you have a lot of people around you, but you're not in connect with anyone around you. And it's just like, I'll just pull the example of Twitch here. Well, I don't know what has pained me as much in recent times than Twitch's death, in very recent times. And it's because there were so many people around him, but there was no one around him. And one of the things that when it happened that evening, the next day I told my husband, I said, let there be nothing that you can't talk to me about. What is that thing? And in recent times, I've been talking about it. And then I dug it up again in recent times, shame. And it could be that we're ashamed of something that happened to us, or we are ashamed of something that we did. And we don't recognize that the past is irrecoverable and it's irredeemable. And just being bothered by the things that you have no more control over can drive you to a point of no return. And I actually wrote it down that many of the things that shape our lives, that have significant impact on our lives, often happen between ages 0 and 18. Mm-hmm. And why is that? Because between ages 0 and 18, the human being does not have a rational brain. A child is not born with a thinking brain. It's at the point, it's only his active brain, which is what puts the amygdala that makes him to get into action, him or her to get into action, and the emotional brain, which is feed me, feel me, do for me. It's all about me, which is the one that judges, which is one that thinks the world is all about it, which is one that feels no one else matters but me. Now, if between ages 0 and 18, that child or that individual is not taught the importance of choices and consequences, is not formed to choose self, to reason, so that you progressively build the thinking brain. By the time the thinking brain forms, with the rational brain forms between ages 18 and 24, when it casts, you find out that there are people that are still stuck in their teenage years, but they are 50, but they are 60, but they are still stuck in the behavioral patterns that they operated in between ages 0 and 18. And it's the same thing, because that is the place where the rational brain has not yet formed, whatever impressions happen to that person stays. So where there is child abuse, where there is rape, where there is divorce, where there is a broken home, where there is a distant parent, yes, most of the traumas that people deal with often happen between ages 0 and 18. Because that is when the emotional brain is heightened. That is when the everything seems like it's either for me or it's against me. It's either all happy and as human beings, we are programs. Everything that we learned, everything that we have become is a program. How we see, how we talk, how we behave is a program. Because except for children that are born with defects, we are all born tabula rasa. That is why when a baby is born and you're putting your finger close to the baby's eye, baby doesn't blink. Baby is just looking at you. All they do is cry for food, cry for hunger because they're hungry, or they're uncomfortable, heat. They said, statistics state that the only thing that a newborn baby is afraid of is the fear of heights. The fear of falling, because as human beings, yes, we want to have a balance. That is why when you throw a newborn baby, there's a way they stress, like, what's happening to me? Yes. So that is what they are born with. That is the only fear they come with. Every other thing is learned. It is learned by how we react around them, by the environment we create around them, by the way they hear us talk, by the way they hear us react or respond. So we find out that many of us as women, we are repeating the patterns of our mothers or the women that raised us. And many of us as men were repeating the patterns of our fathers or men that raised us, or typically repeating the patterns of the adults that were around us. So with all this happening, if between the ages 0 and 18, there is any disruption and it is not carefully navigated and managed for the child to now re-become, that trauma is carried into how we communicate ourselves through the rest of life. It determines how we marry. It determines how we choose the jobs we choose. It determines how we engage ourselves. It determines how we dress. It determines how we talk, how we choose to look, what we choose to do with ourselves. Because between ages 0 and 18, where the brain, the thinking brain, which is the brain of choice, was being formed, there was no clear navigation to say this way or that way. And typically, right or wrong, it cannot be determined in the present. It is always determined by the outcome. It's in the future. It's by the outcome that in retrospect, you can determine what is right or wrong. So all we can really, and it is only at this point that we can now, it's those that have experience, I beg your pardon, that can now give to those people that do not have that. Based on experience, this is what I consider to be right or wrong. So you can choose to say, okay, I want to have my own experience, or I want to link to an experience that I have seen from someone else and pretty much work around it to form my own narrative. But in all of it, the choice of who we become, of how we engage and how our mental health is affected always goes back to the traumas, and sometimes hidden traumas that we do not deal with, but rather we create coping mechanisms around, and we call it in Nigeria suffering and smiling. We create coping mechanisms around up until we can no longer cope, and then we are projecting that hurt or projecting that bitterness to people with aggression or passive aggression. For those that can't project people simply because they have learned to cower so much, they suppress that emotion up until they implode, either through terminal ailments or suicide and all those many other things. Yeah, pretty much. And I talked about the reason I brought in Twitch was because how it is that so many people around him, yet no one around him is what I've recently termed the extrovert's darkness. And I was just writing about it. I feel like this is an extrovert's darkness because there are times when every human being was created to be filled. We are not just to give and give and give. Every human being wants to be appreciated, even if we want to downplay it sometimes, to say, no, I don't like to take center stage. Give the person center stage. That's when you'll find out that the person loves it.
They like it. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. And I'll quickly just give an example of, so my husband, for example, he had all his life, he had never celebrated his birthday. It was from a Muslim family, and the parents didn't believe, father just believed that when you were born, we killed a ram. That's a ram. So every birthday, remember that ram, right? So he had never, but he's always giving, always in people's events, he's there. He's organizing for this and doing this for that, and that. I'm like, okay, on the 45th birthday, let me do something for her. And I threw him a surprise birthday party where it wasn't a big one, but I invited his key friends that he hadn't seen for 20 years. Some came into town from London, from Switzerland, close friends from primary, close friends from university, close friends from his previous church, close friends from around Lagos. And I didn't let him know they were coming. So when he got into the venue and saw them, at first he was trying to put his bold face, but suddenly he just said, "Is this for me?" And he broke down crying. Because he said he had never been on the receiving end, and just being on the receiving end was incomprehensible. Every human being wants to be appreciated. Now, the thing is, when we are not used to receiving it, and that was something I had to tell him, you need to get used to receiving. It's okay to receive. It's okay
for receiving.
It's okay. It's okay to even ask for it. Now, sometimes as women, particularly, we do this a lot. We'll be like, so you cannot even hug me. What we're trying to say is, I would like you to hug me. Yeah. But then when we say you cannot even hug me, we are attacking. And what happens when you attack? The person raises a defense. So what the person will tell you in return is not what you would like to hear, because you attacked, and every human being will self-protect first. So in all of this, in checking our thoughts, checking what those thoughts produce, checking our traumas, going back to deal with the traumas that probably are stored in places that we don't know. The fact that we have passed it doesn't mean it has gone. It's just a matter of time. Something will trigger and open it, and you'll find out that what you thought was healed was not healed. And probably it's going to make you project in a way that you may not be appreciating, that you may not be happy about. Yeah.
Happy about. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are things that, I know from my childhood, I had to sit with them, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling.
Yes.
You have to sit with it. You have to sit with it, and you have to either find a truth teller, or you tell yourself the truth. This happened when I was this is how I feel about this. I felt helpless. And when those situations cycle back, and you feel helpless again, you have to ask yourself, why am I feeling helpless in this situation? Yes. What am I feeling, And it's really living in the now, that living in the now. Okay, we have quite a lot of comments here. Ijoma Aguba says, she was thinking about her happiest years, and there were the years when she left the comfort and confines of home and began to live her life. Work, travel, adventure, relationships. And she's, Ijoma, that's really great. She says she's currently in her happiest years. That's fantastic.
Amazing.
And Geraldine says, unresolved trauma permeates the present and the future, as does resolved trauma and healing. Yes, that is true. And we really, our desire is that we resolve these things as much as possible. But we can only resolve. I saw a very interesting image the other day. I mean, I'm also a life coach, so I go to those coaching sites and stuff. And it showed a can. Those cans that have the ring pull. So it showed the ring pull. The first one was off, and then there was another ring pull firmly closed underneath it. And we said, this is what you get sometimes when you're coaching people, right? You take up one layer, and then there's another layer in place, hiding. And sometimes we are not aware that we are hiding. We think we're being as open as
I think
possible.
we're being smart sometimes. We think we're being
Yes,
smart. We're
yes.
being
Sometimes people are
open.
messing with their minds. Yeah, yeah, yes.
But I think the truth is, just like say, one of the toughest questions, yes, is the question, who are you?
Yes.
And for the fear, it's just like how the fear of falling, as human beings, we like control, in the least to be in control of ourselves or in the control of what is happening to us. And when we are digging into our minds to try to understand these things, there's the fear of, is the vulnerability, the fear of even being vulnerable with self. And when we can't be vulnerable with self, we can't be true with self. We can't even make that change with self. And if it's okay, I like to share my stories. If there's anything that has given me more insight into how I have become and helped me to also redefine who I want to become, is by understanding my stories. And you can't successfully chart a future without understanding the history that has led you to your present. So if there's anything at all, I go back, I ask my mother questions. I try to remember. So one of the things that life coaching did for me, my first client was myself. When I finished my life coaching course, and even when I finished my CBT course, I told myself, I can't be helping someone else find clarity for their lives and transform their behaviors when I haven't found clarity for mine and transformed my behavior. So that means I'm helping someone to live a more optimal life when I am not living it. Let me give myself the gift so that from the fullness of that gift and from the joy I experience in that gift, I can then give it out. So I went on a journey of self-discovery to pretty much ask, how did I begin to like what I like, hate what I hate, do what I do? Where did it come from? Remember, we are all programs of environments, of sight, of sound. And just trying to remember, when was the first time I did this? When was the last time I did this? What's the faintest memory I have of this? And I'll quickly just use the interesting one of red, right? Which helped me to discover another one that I had to heal from. So in 2016, someone had asked Christmas, I'd put on a red lace for Thanksgiving. And a friend of mine, I posted it on social media, and a friend of mine, very close friend of mine from university, just said, Steph, which other color would she wear for Thanksgiving if not red? Red girl. And she laughed, all right? And when I saw it, I laughed as well. But in that instant, I asked, where did this come from? And just being able, quite important, all behaviors are learned. Always ask, where did this come from, whether good or bad, so that you can know what to repeat and know what to stop. And then I sat on that, I was just thinking, red, red, red. And interestingly, I took the picture with another woman who was putting on a pink and a blue sari. She's married to an Indian. And then I was just admiring it and looking at it. And in that is, I was like, I wish I could have a red sari. And I just had a eureka moment, flashback to the reason I wanted a red sari. Growing up, somewhere between my ages 10, 11, 12 into my mid-teenage years, I spent a lot of time watching Indian movies. I watched Indian movies, probably even before 10, what am I saying? Somewhere between ages 8. I watched Indian movies so much, I wanted to get married to an Indian. I was learning their songs, I was learning their dances, and I was trying to learn some of their language, kush church music, and all those funny things, right? Yes, it was as young as I was, and I was looking forward to the day I would get married to my Indian boo. I looked for Indian husband and not see. I just didn't see. If not, Rita knows the story. I just didn't see Indian husband. So I tell my husband sometimes, like, you're the Indian man, you're just a black version, right? I remember I had a cousin that was even trying to get me an Indian husband. But then for belief and faith reasons, I didn't find anyone with whom I shared the same values and principles that I wanted for us to be able to pass in common union to our children. But when I was tracking that, when I was connecting the dots, I realized that the reason I love red It was an unconscious programming, but it came from the fact that I was looking forward to my Indian wedding with my Indian bow. And the color of the Indian outfit for the woman is red. So
I know red is a powerful color.
and in that instant, I connected the dots. So this love for red, I by the skin of a tooth, I didn't wear a red wedding gown. My husband didn't mind. But then he just said, in case people come to the wedding and walk away, know that it's because of your red dress.
I wonder what's going on.
Idol worshiper or something, right? But my wedding was pretty much red and silver. It was mostly red. I had a red bouquet. I wore red shoes. The person that made my wedding gown refused to make it. I said, okay, put a red lace somewhere. I wore red shoes and all of it. But all of that, when people just ask me, why do you like red? I said, because it is the blood of Jesus, because it is romantic, because his blood doesn't red flow through your veins. I defend it. That was the coping mechanism. But the real thing was, I had an underlying love for red through my desire to want to marry an Indian. So that was an unconscious programming that I tracked. Now, when I tracked that, I'm like, oh, so this is where red came from. Where did the hatred for pink come from? I hated pink with a passion that I told my husband that when we have children, if we have girls, I would not buy pink for any of them. It's too soft, it's too maka. Those were my words. I said, I'll buy the purples, I'll buy the lilacs and the yellows and the brown, and I will not buy pink. So when I tracked that pattern of red, I said, okay, let's track this pattern of pink. Where did this hatred come from? And I immediately remembered that I loved pink at a younger age. I did love pink. Matter of fact, my 7th birthday present was a pink shirt. My father went into the supermarket then in Delta State and said, pick anything you want from mother care, from the children's, pick anything you want. And I picked a pink shirt. I still remember how it looks, and a blue pair of jeans with a black pair of shoes. My birthday always falls around Easter, April 12th. And everyone is home for Easter. So I wore that outfit and we all went for a family photo shoot. That was April 12th. My father died in a ghastly motor accident, April 18th, exactly 6 days later. And in that time in the 80s, mid-80s, there was this sitcom called Willy Willy. And the story about Willy Willy was that Willy Willy was a well-to-do man, was an affluent man, who was killed by people that knew him because they wanted to take his wealth. So after they killed him, his spirit refused to rest up until he avenged his death. And when we went to the village for my father's burial, we were told that it is people close to my father that killed him. So what immediately came to mind was, so like Willy Willy, his spirit will roam to ensure that he finds vengeance. So when we came back from the village, I just picked up the shirt to wear, and immediately I felt like if his spirit is around, and he just bought me this shirt, when his spirit must be here. So for every time I wanted to wear the pink shirt, I was afraid. For every time, there was even a time my mom was trying to force me to wear it. I cried so much. I burned the shirt. I put in there the fire and it burned, and I gave the excuse of it had burned. But then, fast forward, I see pink and I hate it. I judge pink. I went to a secondary school, our uniform was pink. I hated it. I always look forward to the end of class so that I could change to our form uniform. But then in connecting the dots, I realized that it wasn't the hatred for pink because it was soft or mocha. It was the fact that it reminded me of my father. And as a child, I couldn't process that loss. As a child, I couldn't process what was happening. That was trauma. And they said the brain of a child, or the brain of children pretty much have a progression of growth. But once there is a trauma, it disrupts that progression. And a 7-year-old child in a normal home, a normal life, is no longer like a 7-year-old child who has experienced a disruption of the loss of a parent or separation of parents or a divorce or whatever it is. So they begin to behave more mature and approach life from a survival perspective, from a survival place, which makes them more defensive, which makes them more pretty much self-protective because of that thing that happened to them. I didn't process all of this up until that 2016 when I discovered that the reason I hated pink was because it reminded me of my father. So the red was okay. I chose to stick with it. But the pink, I said I had to break. So I put myself on my therapy table and told myself I had to break this. First thing I did was went on Jumia and I bought myself a pink pair of sneakers. But it wasn't so pink. It was a bit of blush. I thought, okay, let me start small. Let me not rush into it. But buying that blush pink, I thought I had solved it up until last year. Okay, this is 2023. 2021, I went for a training in Ijebu-Ode with a colleague and I forgot my towel. So he was going into town and I said, okay, Steph, I'm going to buy something. Should I buy you anything? I said, oh yes, I forgot my towel and a toothbrush. Please help me get them. And he bought me a pink, the original pink that God created. He bought me a pink, just like the pink shirt.
Okay. Okay.
And the moment he sent the driver to bring it to my room, as soon as I opened the door, took it, I was startled, goosebumps all over my body. I took it and dropped it on the table. And then I marched to his room with anger, with severe anger. Why did you buy me a pink towel? What? And then it was like, no vex now. I thought babes like pink. In that instant, I caught myself. And I realized that I was aggressing towards someone that didn't hurt me because anger is actually a mask. I was afraid of confronting something that had been running away from. So immediately, thank God I'd been practicing catching my thoughts. I caught myself in the middle of it, apologized to him severely for doing that, went back to my room and started to self-therapy. And I put the towel on the bed and began to tell myself, Daddy is not there. Daddy died because he died. And Daddy's death had nothing to do with this pink, with the color pink. This is a towel. It is just pink because God created the color. It's part of the combination of the colors that God created, and it's okay to use it. I started to self-talk. As I was doing that, a flood of tears. And for the first time, I grieved my father's death. I grieved at 41 what happened at age 7. I grieved it like he just died. And I began to say something like, I began to live through the emotions of his absence. And remember, I wish you were there when I entered university. I wish you were there when I had my first heartbreak. I wish you knew what this person did to me. I wish you were there to walk me down the aisle. I didn't like that my brother had to walk me down the aisle. I wish you told me how to prepare for marriage. I wish. And in all of that, I cried. I wept. There was a strong presence all over the room. I knew I had to break out of it. I experienced that moment, and then I took the towel and wrapped it around myself. I was afraid. I had goosebumps all over, but then I told myself, I need to break this. If I don't break it, I'll keep running away from it. And then when I was done, I got into the bathroom and I used the towel. The next morning, something said, you have used it now. It's okay, leave it. You can use that. That's more. No, I went back to it and I used it again. When I came back and said, okay, there was now this thought of it, now you are home. You can discard it and don't be punishing yourself. You have other towels. No, I put all the towels aside. I kept using that pink towel until I knew I had gotten past that phase. So I had to self-therapy. And there are many other stories like that of me just digging into the things of the traumas that have happened to me. Otherwise, what happens now is I keep aggressing towards people that did not hurt me, that probably are even trying to help me, because I didn't learn how to track myself, become present with who I have become, make the choices of who I want to become, and disentangle myself from the hurts of the past, and then begin to take intentional steps to walk towards who I want to become and preserve myself. Yeah, so I just hope that helped anyone to also be able to track yourself, track your thoughts, and track your patterns.
I believe it's really helped, and I'd just like to share, we're almost out of time. But I'd like to share Rita's comment. Rita says we need to be present to ourselves, face our fears, and also it helps to have the tools to manage trauma. Some of us don't have those tools, because sitting with yourself is the most it's like sitting in silence. There's a meditation I do. We're using an app, and the first time I had to be just quiet. And they just say, observe your breath. Don't breathe in a particular way, just observe your breath. I kept twitching. I was just like for 3 minutes, I I was fidgeting. Now I can do 10 minutes, I can do 20 minutes, I can sit with it.
Even.
When the thoughts come in, I'm like, okay, write that down, then go back to do what I'm doing.
Absolutely, yes.
But I'd like to, this has been incredible. I mean, we haven't reached everything, touched everything that we do. But that's the way it is on Unplugged. We have such amazing guests that people really, we don't get to the end of what we do. But I'd like to share one thing, just in case anybody needs the information. There is the National Suicide Prevention Counseling Center in Nigeria, in Abuja. It's based in Abuja. And we did call them. They serve the whole nation, you know, but probably on the telephone. If you do want, please come into our DMs or post it on Julia Jacks Consulting, and we will put that number there. And I know they're therapists and coaches. And we also have Stephanie. We're going to put up her flyer later on today. Stephanie has a program coming up on January 28th, right? Yes, January 28th at Alliance Francaise in Ikoyi, Lagos, 9 a.m. It's Dealing, Healing, and Winning with stephREDD, you know. So we're going to put that up on Julia Jacks Consulting on all our socials.
Thank you.
So what I'd like to ask you, because to round up, is really about entrepreneurship, loneliness, and mental health. People say the hustle. I don't like using the word hustle because for me it has a certain connotation that is like, as we say it in Nigeria, jam body, you know. And I think for me, entrepreneurship is a little bit more deliberate. It's a lot more deliberate, like that, intentional than that, you know. It's not something I just get into, you know. So the grit, the discipline, the consistency, what kind of mental attitude can support this? And how can entrepreneurs develop that, who may not have it, develop it? And I'm saying this not just because of your work, because as women, as men, we have personal things that also come and intertwine with our professional issues, you know. So what mental attitude, how can we develop a positive mental attitude that can help us deal with issues of grit, resilience, consistency, discipline?
I'll pretty much just share what has helped me. And what has helped me is first looking within and then identifying why in the first place I'm engaging. I believe that we spend so much time trying to do and so little time trying to be. If we do without being, we expend ourselves to the point of no return. But if we do from a place of being, we are fueled by who we are. We are fueled by who we have. We are progressively becoming. So we first fill our tanks, then give from that tank. But I believe that there are many of us that are running on empty tanks. And the pressure to want to keep showing up makes us show up with a facade that we're full, but we're really empty. And it is that emptiness that could now push us to the point of no return, where you give and give and give and give, and then there's nothing else to give. And I'm just going to put again in perspective what happened to Twitch. He kept giving laughter. Every single feedback about him, everyone that knew him, they all said he was such an amazing person. He brought laughter into the room. He brought joy and light into the room. He was so much light and what they call it, love and light.
Love and light, yeah.
So how is it that someone that was so much love and light embodied a lot of darkness and was eventually consumed by that darkness? It's because is it possible that he kept giving from a place without filling up, without feeling that need, without feeling that hollow, without releasing the tension, releasing the pressure, right? Just release it and embrace being present, embrace the fullness of self, embrace everything that he has been created to be. I think I say 2020, even though it was a global lockdown, it was the most profound year for me. Profound because it was in 2020 that everything that stephREDD has progressively become started in 2020. And just the ability to look inwards. One of the most profound statements I stumbled on in 2020 was when what I was studying in the wee hours of the morning, which are normally my most productive hours. And I stumbled on the quote by Albert Einstein that said, there's a genius in every human being, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, to spend the rest of his life believing that it is stupid. And in that instant, I just asked myself, how frequently have I been stupid? Because I am trying to judge my genius through someone else's lenses, judge how I look, judge how I speak, judge how I dress, judge everything by someone else's perspective through someone else's lenses without defining myself, who I want to be, how I want to become that, and how I want to progressively do and be from that. And I think the ability for us to just come to that place of awareness of why we are in the first place, why we are doing, such that even when the challenge or the pressure comes, and I will share this story again, about once I was walking on the streets of Admiralty Way in Lekki Phase 1, Lagos. And it was that period where I had hit rock bottom after I had been fired from a job and I had no car. I went back to ground zero. I was using the keke napep. Where I didn't have money for keke napep, I would trek. So one of those days I was trekking with my leg at these bends, and I walked by a fashion home of someone that I knew, someone that I know very well. And my mind just said, see your mate. She's not even your mate. You senior her far. See what she has done with her life. See what she has done. You, no job, no nothing. See, you are. In that instant, and the ability to catch your thoughts, I call it self-conferencing. I caught that thought and refocus. When you do not have what you're focusing on, anything distracts you, anything gives you pressure in these days of social media. So I remembered and I repost and I just focused on that instant of, where did I say I was going to? Who did I say I wanted to become? What did I say I wanted to do? Okay, that's it. Okay. Does it look like what she's doing? It doesn't. Face your front.
So
in that moment,
yourself.
In that instant, I refocused and told myself, that is her journey. And mine does not even look any way like hers. In the course of becoming, even some people that would be like, oh, Steph, because of this job that you lost, why not try this? Now they had good intentions, but because I knew where I wanted to be, I knew there were some things that even though people were telling me you are being stupid for not taking this, I recognized that it didn't align with what I saw here. And I would have to walk the course of the journey to become, because what they are seeing for me to become is not what I am seeing for myself to become. So it's easy to, when you know what your decisions are easier to make. I think Oscar Wilde or Michelle Sandlin says, when you know what your values are, making decisions become easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're able to choose based on the values I have for self, what those values have defined for what I want to do and what I want to become and where I want to get to. And because I already have a forward vision of things to come, I can come into the present and say, no, I'm not giving into this pressure. I am going to be contented with where I am, with who I have become, and go through the process of engaging myself and re-engaging myself until I re-become and progressively become. So in this times of entrepreneurial stress, oh, this person is doing this, what they are doing, is it like yours? And where they are in their business, have you reached it yet? Because life is in phases. There's the beginning phase.
Backstories. We never
There's
know.
the beginning, that pressure. And this is what I say to entrepreneurs that are going through that pressure. There are phases. There's the beginning phase where you are just starting and pretty much trying to plant, which is where it's hardest sometimes because it takes a lot to build, and also minding what your seed is. Because if your seed is an Iroko seed and you are comparing yourself with someone whose seed is a tomato seed, you will kill yourself. So understanding the power, the potency of your seed and recognizing the difference, which your genius is in your seed. Recognizing the differentiating factor between someone else's seed and your seed will help you to refocus to say, okay, I need to keep watering. I need to keep pruning. It is not yet time for it to sprout. When it sprouts, it sprouts. But up until then, I'll keep watering. I'll keep showing up. I'll keep putting my work into the ground. One day it will show up. Now, that could be in the beginning phase. When it eventually shows up, you transition into the middle phase. And then the middle phase is now trying to establish it more and compound. And then the legacy phase, where you are trying to build a legacy you have built well. So sometimes we see people that may be in their legacy phases, while in our beginning phases, and we're comparing. We're trying to kill ourselves in our beginning phases because we're comparing ourselves with someone that is in their legacy phase, or someone that is in their compounding phase, or even someone that is in the transitioning phase. Sometimes we're in transition between level 1 and level 2, or level 2 and level 3. We are not on the same phases. And that's why sometimes when people come and say, mentor me, I say, mentor you with what? So I want to be like you. I say, if you want to be like me, then you have to have the father that had me, that died. You have to have the mother that raised me. You have to have the experience that I've been through. You have to have gone through this and gone through this and gone through this to be like me. You can't be like me. You can only be the genius of you. You may learn my principles if you want to learn my principles and my practices, so long as they align with your vision. If they don't, then find your own cause.
Yes.
The most important thing that we may think that I say we may want to copy is the aspect, the values of discipline, the values of commitment, the values of consistency, the values of courage. Those are the principal pillars that we want to emulate. So how are we showing up disciplined to that goal that we want to achieve, committed to it, consistent with it, thorough through the process, showing up in that aspect? That is our call. That is the easiest way, in my perspective, in my belief, that we can break this barrier of pressure that pushes us to the point of no return with mental health illnesses and mental health challenges and all of that. To the point where we don't even take care of our health, and then we begin to blame innocent village people when we are the ones that didn't sleep well, we didn't eat well, we didn't exercise well, we didn't drink well. And then yes, so we create a foothold for village people to come in, and then we blame them when we're the ones that let them come in, right? So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. When we were doing research for this, it was amazing how many things show up as symptoms of mental health: anger, apathy, overeating, oversleeping. Because there's a point at which when you sleep and then you oversleep, it's not beneficial anymore, you know.
Yeah.
And irritability, all those things. And if you have those signs, Stephanie has given us quite a few tools and then shared her story with us. And I think that the whole thing of capturing your thoughts, it's very important as we learn how to mind our minds, because where our minds go, that's where our actions will go.
Absolutely.
You know? And like she said, what's past is past. You can't sit down. If you keep mourning the past, you know what? Nothing's going to change about it. It's what is the now that will change. Stephanie, I want to thank you very, very much for, somebody said in the chat box that we could listen to you all day. And I could have this conversation all day. It's somewhere that I like to sit. I like to sit in uncomfortable places and ask myself why, how, what happened, you know?
Yeah.
And because I feel when people say die empty, this is part of what I want to, I just go, I don't want to die full and yucky. I want my spirit to be clean. I want to be in a happy place, and I go. And for the entrepreneurs who are out there, would be and actual entrepreneurs, can she come again? Oh my goodness, you can go for a program. Is this a hybrid program?
It's a hybrid program. It's virtual and physical. Yes, please come for your 3. And there are going to be tools from there that you can engage for self-optimization and all of that.
Okay, so we're going to post all her details on Julia Jack's consulting pages, and I also post on my personal page. You know, it's on January 28th, and if she does agree to come, we do have another session that we are talking about. What about you for the woman? You know, what about you? And it's this whole thing about drinking from, well, emptying your cup fully onto others and having nothing. So, and we were not in a rush. We were in a rush earlier, and I just said, something just stopped me. I said, why are you rushing? People who are thirsty are going to be thirsty in February or March or April, you know? So it was not sluggishness. I know some of my staff were saying, let's do everything in January. I said, no, January is my thinking time. January is my come to Jesus time. I need to sit down and hear my instructions very clearly. So I think when we ask her nicely, she'll come again. And yes, but we'd like to thank you, Stephanie,
Thank
and
you.
thank everybody who stayed until now and those who will listen to the replay. You know, we couldn't have gotten off to a more explosive and intentional start to the Unplugged year. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
I
everyone.
wish you all a fabulous, joyful, daily joyful year. That is my wish for you. No matter what, you can be joyful. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.